G'day and Kaya, and welcome to the Australians Teach English podcast, the podcast by language learners, with language learners, for language learners. My name is Glenn, and I'm the host of the Australians Teach English podcast. And if you would like to support this podcast, you can go to our Patreon at patreon.com/Australians Teach English. And there you can have a direct impact and say on the creative the creative output of this show and more. And today I've got one of my friends' girlfriends, actually, and a friend of mine, it must be said, Emilia. And at the moment, she is Preggers. She is up the duff. Some horrible sayings that we can say in English. Como está você? Tudo bem?
Tudo bem, Glenn. E
Now,
você?
yeah, Está bem, sorry. There we go. There's some false friends. I can't remember if I'm
Good
speaking in
effort.
Portuguese or Spanish. Tudo bem. Now, are you in a grave condition at the moment?
Am I in a what? Sorry?
Você está grávida?
Estou grávida. Estou
Mm.
grávida.
So are you in a grave condition?
In a grave condition.
Yeah.
That's a really good, expression. I
You're
don't
you're
really
not
know.
you're not in a grave condition, are you?
Well, you mean like of being pregnant?
Yeah, well, you're pregnant. So you are not in a
Well,
grave condition. No.
my first trimester was very hard, was very challenging.
But
Now
I wouldn't say that's in a grave condition though.
Definitely not. No, I'm not in a grave condition. I'm in a pregnant condition, uh, and no, but I'm not in a grave condition. No,
And you're not embarrassed, are you?
I'm not embarrassed. No, no,
What?
no, I'm not.
Estás embarazada?
Não estou embaraçada. No.
Yes, you are. You're
Well,
embarazada.
in Spanish, I would say
Yeah.
yes, but
But you're
English, I would say no.
but you're not embarrassed, are you?
No, I'm not.
No, exactly. So what is going on here? You're gravida, but you're not in a grave condition. You're embarazada, but you're not embarrassed. So what's all
That's
this about?
correct. Well, it's telling us about the how languages can actually have different meanings in different contexts with similar words.
Correct.
So we are talking about in embarazada. It's in Spanish. My first language is Portuguese, so that would not really translate to Portuguese. But in English, in Spanish, that would be the right word for it. Yes, and it's funny. That's why it's so important for us to learn the meaning of the words before, because they can seem similar, but the meaning can be completely different.
Yeah, these are
Yeah.
what we call false friends. So words that sound the same or similar in two different
Yeah.
languages, but have different meanings. For example,
Meanings. Yeah.
gravida in Portuguese just means pregnant. But
Yeah.
in English, if we would say someone is in a grave condition, that means they are very, very seriously ill.
Ill.
So
Yeah.
these are some ways that people can get mixed up and confused in when they are learning new languages. The classic example is embarrassed and embarazada, when someone is pregnant, not embarrassed. And there are many, many, many others. And that's what we are going to discuss on our little show today. But first, Emilia, a little bit about yourself. Where are you from, and how did you get to Australia?
Okay, so I've been in Australia for a little bit over 10 years now. I came to Australia in my early 20s. I'm from Brazil, and I'm from a coastal city that is about 55 minutes away from São Paulo capital. And my city is called Santos. Santos is very famous for having the biggest port in Latin America. So it's a very important city for Brazil and for South America. Yes, so I came here in my early 20s. And I've been here for a very long time and it doesn't even feel like it, but it's been a while.
And you met, well, a friend of mine and a teammate in my cricket team, James. Is that correct?
Yeah, I met James. We've been together for nearly 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're recently engaged as well, is that correct?
Yeah, it's been over nearly 2 years now. Yeah, 2021.
And
So
how would you say engaged
in
in Portuguese?
Portuguese, noivos, noivado.
Noivos,
Noivado is the
noivas.
noun, engagement, and noivos is how we currently are, the status of our relationship.
So you're not
So
new.
noivos. Hmm?
So you're not new. Is that what you're saying?
No,
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 not new.
no.
In Spanish, I mean, there's really sort of not really that much of a term for it in Spanish, but it would be sort of like prometidos, prometida, prometido. But they're not
Ah, yeah,
kind of, I guess that in an old sense, it would be promised, but that's pretty old language.
yeah,
We really wouldn't say that these days.
yeah.
And so what have you been doing since you met James in Australia?
Well, I've been, yeah. So when I met James, I was in my second semester of my university. I was studying international relations at Curtin University.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we met when I was in my early stages of university life,
Mm-hmm.
and he was finishing his master's. So we were both like, at the same kind of vibe and like, studying quite hard. Yeah, so I finished my degree back in 2016,
Mm-hmm.
international relations. And then I got a job at the government. So I'm working for a government agency for the past 5 years now.
Mm-hmm. And do you
Yeah.
use your language skills in this role as well?
No, I do not. No, I do. I'm being
Really?
honest.
So you
No,
got a degree in international
um,
relations and
relations,
you don't use your language
no,
skills?
I do not utilize any of my international relations. Well, let's say that there are some transferable skills and knowledge that I learned while I was doing my university
Mm-hmm.
study. But what I do is contract management. So I'm managing contracts, and it's really different to my degree and to applying my language skills. I basically speak English all the time. I don't have to speak any other language.
Mm-hmm.
So in this particular role, I do not have to.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So when you came to Australia, what was difficult with the language when you came to Australia?
Oh, it was very difficult. First of all, I never really liked English very much. I was always running away from my English classes because I always had not the language itself. The language is great. It was more like, the learning process. And for me, it was very, very difficult. And I was never really in the right mindset to actually learn. Maybe I was distracted thinking about boyfriends, and I wasn't ready to actually learn another language. Yeah, so when I came here, my English was like very, very, very poor, very, very poor. And so I had to learn English from scratch, from zero. Was very challenging, very, very challenging for me, especially as a young adult. When you are in your, when you're younger, it's easier. But when you are a young adult, like myself, it was much harder. So I had a lot of difficulties, a lot of challenges, and it's an ongoing process. You're always learning.
Yes. And there were some challenges and not least the false friends. So there was one particular one that caught you out when you came to Australia and you started
Yeah.
using. And which one was that?
Yeah. So a particular one that comes to mind is the word deception. So that word in English means something completely different to what in Portuguese it means. So when I first saw that word deception, I thought that the meaning was similar to the word in Portuguese, decepção in
Mm-hmm.
Portuguese. So when I saw that deception meant something completely different, I was like, wow, that's insane. Because decepção in Portuguese means disappointment.
Mm.
And deception in English, it means when you're being deceived
Yes.
by someone or something. And it's so different to the meaning in Portuguese. So that's one that comes to mind because it's a word that in Portuguese I use a lot in my vocabulary. And in English, I was about to say that when I learned that the word was very different, the meaning was very different.
Yes. And so
Yeah.
this is a big challenge, especially when languages are mostly similar, like the Latin
Yeah.
based or the Romance languages with English, is that yes,
Hmm.
most of the time, if you have a
Yeah.
word that is similar, you think that it will mean the same thing or a similar thing, but then 10% or 15% of the time they
Mm.
don't. And so
That's right.
so this is a bit of a struggle because you can never be 100% confident with what it is that you're actually saying, whether you're going from English to Portuguese or Spanish,
Yeah.
or from Portuguese Spanish to English, or what have you. So how were you able to manage this deception that you felt so deceived with these false friends?
Yeah. Well, I'm a perfectionist, and prior to having smartphones, an iPhone, I used to have a dictionary with me.
Mm-hmm.
Everywhere I was going to, I used to take this dictionary with me, or at least I would remember the word, and I would then check to see what that really meant if I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
sure. So I did a lot of that during my learning. I still do because you're always learning, right?
Mm-hmm.
But now you have Google. Now you just get your phone out of your pocket and then you check that that sentence or the phrase or whatever or that word, and you then know the meaning of that. So that's what I did. And another way to know faster is to have local friends. Is to make friends with people who are actually locals. Maybe find a partner or friends or people that you may study with at work. And I was able to make friends from here, from Australia, from Perth. And I would ask those questions, and they would be very kind to help me, especially during my early years.
Mm.
Yeah, so I think that's how I learned. And it's a trial and error. Like you're always like you may make mistakes, and I've made
Yes.
mistakes. I probably put myself in really bad situations while I was learning. I still probably do. Like
I think everyone does. I don't think that's something that
yeah,
can avoid. That's just a natural process and a natural part of it. But
exactly. Yeah,
but yes, definitely not making false friends, making genuine friends with a shared interest in improving your language skills. I think that's a really key thing to do.
yeah.
And
And you'd be surprised like how many people are keen and happy to help you.
so
Yeah.
when you met James, was he interested in learning Portuguese? Did he have any interest in learning languages at all?
Um, yes and no. Why do I say yes? Yes, because I don't know if you know, but his mom's first language is Italian. As when she was a child, because her
Mm-hmm.
parents were Italians, so they used to speak in Italian with her at home.
Mm-hmm.
So when he was born, his grandma was still alive, and he was kind of exposed to Italian.
Mm,
But then, I don't think he ever learned Italian fluently or even like regularly. So he totally forgot about it. But there are words that he remembers because it was part of his childhood.
mm,
So when he met me, and I was Brazilian, and I had the romantic, my first language was a romantic language,
mhm,
Portuguese. He would be remembering some words in Italian, and Italian and Portuguese are very similar, I have to say.
mhm.
And that was nice. That was really nice to actually have that. Like someone who knows a few words, and there was some similarity there.
So
And he
he actually had a genuine interest in learning something, basically.
he did. Yeah, he did. Yeah. And
Mhm,
then just after a few years, he got him. It was more serious for him to actually learn Portuguese, and he felt like the need, especially because he did go to Brazil to visit my family there. So there was a reason to learn, and not just like because of me, and but also because of my family. So
mhm,
there was something bigger there that he saw. And now his Portuguese is so much better. I'm very proud of him. Like
mm.
he's learning Portuguese faster.
He keeps avoiding the show though. I've
He keeps
he keeps avoiding being on this show.
Yeah, no, he did say to me the other day that you guys have to organize
Absolutely, I've been
a
waiting
podcast
for him
day,
to
and
come
he
on
would
for
visit me.
ages.
I know. Just email him and send him a reminder, because he is very keen to actually be part of this podcast. He told
Mhm.
me today, actually.
Yeah, exactly. He needs to stop being scared. He needs to stop being a wuss. Come on the
He's
show.
been part of a few podcasts just
I know.
recently.
I've listened to them.
Yeah, exactly. So he would be more than happy to you know to be part of the podcast.
But his story will obviously we'll leave it for another episode. But this is a relatively common story in Australia because two-thirds of people in Australia have quite a close ancestry to someone born overseas. Either they themselves were
Yeah.
born overseas or their parents were born overseas, and
Hmm.
there's a fair chance that English wasn't their first language. And but the problem is
Absolutely.
Australia is such a monolingual culture that we don't
Hmm.
really encourage people to speak anything else but English. So then when people grow up, they
Yeah.
feel like something is missing, that they haven't actually learnt the language of their
Hmm.
parents or their grandparents. So it is quite unusual that in Australia people feel a little bit frustrated that they haven't been able to actually connect with that language. And so a lot of people are
Absolutely.
genuinely interested
Yeah,
in trying to learn another language, even if they don't necessarily know how to go about it.
I agree. Yeah. I've had that experience of noticing how many people come from different, even if it's an English speaking country, but we do have so many people who were not born in Australia, or maybe they are the second generations or the first generations that were born in Australia,
Mm.
and they are all very. What I do like about Australia, and specifically Perth, is how curious they are to know more about you, about your culture, like Portuguese, and there is a genuine interest of them learning more about your background, and
Although
I really like
they might
that.
express it in a very strange way, probably not in a way that's not necessarily familiar with Brazilians or Latinos or South Americans or any like this. I think Australians are very can be. I'm not sure if you felt this way when you came here, but people would be quite cold or reserved, not because they were being rude, but they didn't actually know how to
Yeah.
ask what they wanted to ask. Did you experience that as well?
Yeah, there is definitely a difference in terms of behavior, and Brazilians are very warm, and they are very naturally welcoming. uh, we want to be friends with you like
Hmm.
immediately. We have like there is no reservations from us like to get to know you and to learn more about your family or your background. Here there is a barrier, so I agree that there is more distance between, especially when you meet the person for the first time, or even like at work in various scenarios. I think that it's I see difference. I see,
Mm.
especially because Brazilians, in general, again, it's a massive country with lots of people. Not everyone is exactly the same, but in general, Brazilians are very warm,
Hmm.
and here it's not as, you know what I mean. Like there is that
I
distance that.
like to say, well, like in South America, people know more about you in 5 minutes than people will know about you in 5 hours in Australia. It will take them that long to ask you the same questions that someone from South America will ask you in 5 minutes.
Yeah,
They'll know about your
yeah,
grandparents, they'll know about your pets, they'll know about your favorite everything. Whereas in
yeah.
Australia, it might take weeks for someone to actually ask you these questions
Ask you that
if
question.
they ask
Yeah.
you those questions at all. Yeah. So
Absolutely. No, I agree. And I think, especially my first few years, the cultural impact was much bigger
mhm.
because now I'm kind of more used to the culture. So maybe I don't notice as much. Maybe I just don't care as much either.
Yeah, well,
But
you even come down to the cricket club. So like
well,
so what was that like for you as a culture shock when James said, yeah, I play a little bit of cricket. You should come down and watch.
Glenn, seriously, as you may know, cricket in Brazil does not exist,
No,
right?
he probably had no idea what he was talking about.
I had no idea what he was talking about. So everything was just like new. Like I didn't know anything. I didn't know the rules. I didn't know. To be honest with you, I didn't even know that it existed. Like
Why are
there
these
was a
people wearing
thing.
white pants everywhere? All these sorts of strange
Uh,
strange things.
exactly, and it's such a weird, like the structure of the game and how the dynamic of the game is so particular, very specific. And I don't see like now I do because I understand more about the rules. But before I didn't see the how can I say, I didn't see like why would you
Yeah, the
like
purpose,
cricket? Like
the point of the
yeah,
game.
the point, the purpose, or like what pleasure do you get from that? Like it seems to be such a boring game, such
Hmm.
a like quiet in a way because it's just so strategic, as you know.
Hmm.
So it was very, and James is, you know how crazy he is about cricket. He doesn't only like cricket, he loves
Yeah, he thinks
cricket.
about it all the time. Yeah.
It's his passion. He's part
Yeah.
of the club still. And and I didn't have to because I didn't have to do anything, but I felt like it was important for me to learn more about cricket and to understand why my partner loves it so much. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Just like he does with me as well, like things that I like, and he had to learn to understand more why I like certain things. But cricket is a really good point because in Brazil and most places in South America, it's not really a thing.
No,
You know,
absolutely not.
like yeah, and here it's huge, and then you find out that it's not only huge here, but it's huge in so many other countries.
Mm. Like
And I'm like, what?
if you go to an English speaking country, you really
Yeah,
have to learn at least something about cricket. Like probably the only place that you really won't have to is in the US or in Canada. But even then, you'll still have to learn a little bit about baseball, which is relatively similar, I guess. But
yeah, that's true.
you
Baseball
have
would be
to
important. Yeah,
learn something about it. You can't sort of avoid it if you want to be involved in cultural activities.
yeah.
You became one of the wags, is that correct?
God. Another term that I never heard before, and I had to learn what WAG stands for.
Was while you were down at the
So
cricket club? Is that right?
yes.
So what
So
can you explain it for our listeners out there?
explain why.
The wag. The
The
wag.
WAG term. Oh my God. The first time I actually heard about this term was because we had the girls, all the girlfriends of the boys from the club who play cricket. We have a Facebook group,
Hmm.
and the Facebook group's name is WAGs. But I don't really remember what does WAG stand for
It
again.
stands for
Boys,
wives and girlfriends.
wives and girlfriends. Yeah.
So it's an
Yes. So
acronym.
yes. Yeah, but I actually don't mind it. That term, like that name.
Well,
It's
with the pirates, it was actually always a really healthy group. Like some can be
very,
quite
yeah,
nasty, but this has actually turned out to be a really quite healthy group and doing different fundraisers and I think actually from this they largely got a female cricket team at the Pirates, our cricket club out of the Wags. I think that might have been how it actually started. So did someone actually
yeah.
try and get you to be in the women's cricket team down there? Did they ask you?
Yeah, some of them asked. They were, I think, they encouraging a lot of the girls
But,
to
and
be
and you
part
said and you
of.
said no.
I said no. I'm so sorry. I'm very busy, and I really am. Like I'm busy. I couldn't really um yeah compromise and be part of the team. But I'm so proud of them. They're doing so well.
Yeah, they are. They're doing very, very well. They're doing very well.
Yeah.
Speaking of sports and false friends, when people come to Australia, well, especially from
Mm,
South America, and they say something like football or football,
mm.
what are people going to think?
When you hear football, or
Yeah.
when I say
Well, when
football,
you say football or football, what are people going to automatically think? Are they going to automatically think what you are thinking?
no, they're gonna think about the Australian football.
Correct. And
Yeah, the
good luck
footy. Yeah,
explaining that. I'm not gonna get you to explain that. All I can say to the people out there is watch some of it.
yeah.
No, it is not. No, it is not soccer. No, it is not rugby. No, it is not American football. No, it is none of those things.
No, that's right. Yeah, it's a very and this is another example of a very different sport that I had to get familiar with and to also like people here are very passionate about it, right? They
Absolutely.
massive fans, women and men both, which I really like. I don't see only men going for it, but girls also very into football, the
Hmm.
Australian football, AFL. Yes, so the first time I heard about football, I thought they were talking about soccer,
Mm.
football, but it's not. It's the Australian football.
Hmm. This is a
Yeah,
this is a classic false friend. Even between
yeah,
even between different areas of the English speaking world, because if you go to England, then football will mean what you think of as football. But then if you go to the United
yeah,
States,
that's true. Yeah.
it won't be.
Mm.
It, it will be. They will be thinking of it as American football. So
Yeah.
so
Mm.
even within languages, there can be false friends, and some of them tend to be in between. I'm not sure what it's like with continental Portuguese and Brazilian Portuguese, but certainly with
Mm.
with 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 Spanish and South America, there are some rude words that in Spain are completely innocent. But if you say those same words in South America or in Latin America, then people will laugh at you. So
Mm.
I'm not sure. I'm
Yeah.
not sure if is that similar between like Brazilian Portuguese and continental Portuguese.
Well, the Brazilian Portuguese and another example that I would give you is the Portuguese from Portugal. The Portuguese from Portugal is very different to the Brazilian Portuguese.
Mm-hmm.
The Portuguese from Portugal, I would think no, what we all know as a common sense perspective is that the Portuguese from Portugal is very formal,
Mm-hmm.
much more formal in general than Portuguese from Brazil.
Mm-hmm.
And they use words that we don't really use,
Mm-hmm.
adjectives, just expressions in general. It's very, very different. But I don't know if we have words that mean, I can't really give you an example if we have words in Portuguese that in Portugal would have the opposite meaning. I
for,
think
for,
in general,
for,
it's,
well, I'll give you an example, and you can say yes or no if it's a similar thing in this case. But in Spain, if you
okay.
say quiero coger un taxi, that's completely normal. But if you say that in Latin America, quiero coger un taxi, it's people will laugh at you. They might understand you, but it is quite rude. Yeah.
What does that
It would be
mean?
too rude. Like how, and this is another false friend in
Yeah.
between Englishes. To root in American English is to barrack for, to support a football team. But in Australian English, it is a rude word.
I know what that means. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, it's a really good word to yeah to say because in the Australian English, it's there are very specific words and slang that you only use here. If you
Mm.
used maybe in the UK or in the US, would not really
Be
translate
appropriate.
the exact same way. Would not be appropriate. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and not everyone understands context because
Hmm.
sometimes people would be like, "Oh, that could also mean that," but that could also come across as being very rude.
Mm.
Yeah,
And speaking
so
of
we
sort
have
of
to be
like,
careful with that.
yeah, exactly. And speaking of the different formality levels, just like the different areas of Spanish and
Yeah.
Portuguese speaking regions, what did you find difficult with the formality of the English that you had learnt previously, and then when you came to Australia?
Oh gosh. First of all, I find English very formal in general, even like when you're having a casual conversation.
Really? There you
Uh,
go.
really, really, compared to Portuguese, I find Portuguese much more like colloquial and much more informal in the way that we communicate. So for me, like sometimes I find I actually don't mind it. I don't mind having this formality, but I did see a massive difference in terms of like how people communicate with each other, like how polite people can be here in terms of like you have to say, "Could you please?" You know what I mean? Not saying that I wouldn't say in Portuguese. You have to
Ah,
be, but you know what I mean? Like it's always like
so
it's
the
almost like
the
a
direct
norm.
the directness is a thing. It's like
Yeah.
instead of saying I want tea, I want coffee, we would say like I would like or could I have.
Yeah. Or could I have? But you have very
Mhm.
specific ways. In Portuguese, you can still be nice, but you don't necessarily have to be so formal. And here it's almost like you only have a few ways to be polite by
Mm,
using I would like or could I please. Yeah. So
yeah.
I did find that very different
That that
in
that is the
Portuguese.
that is I would consider, yeah, there's a level of formality, but I would consider that more like the directness. And like
Yeah.
in a restaurant, okay, you know what you want to order. Why would I say I would please like such and such and such and thing? I want
Yeah.
this. Like why do I need to use extra words? It doesn't really serve a purpose. But yes, you are
Yeah.
you are correct. This is what we do in English all the time. Yeah.
All the time
Yeah.
in various situations,
Mm.
all the time. Yeah,
I
basically.
I just thought of a really good false friend actually between Portuguese and Lunfardo or Rio Platense, the word quilombo. Like that's a word that gets used in Argentina all the time, which means a
What is the word
mess.
again? What is that?
Quilombo.
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 Mm.
it has the same origins, but in
Mm-hmm.
Argentina, for example, it would be like a mess, or a traffic jam could be a quilombo. But in
Okay.
in Portuguese, I'm not sure if you even use it in Portuguese. But yeah,
No.
this
Yeah,
would
I
be,
never heard about this word before.
yeah, I think in Brazilian Portuguese, it's a
Yeah.
really, really obscene word.
Oh.
Yeah.
Um,
So such that I'm not even going to like explain it on the show. Yeah. I'll have
I
to
don't
send.
know.
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
that maybe? Do you know how? Can you please spell for me the word? So
Quilombo. Quilombo.
yeah, I don't. Is Colombo?
Quilombo.
I'm trying to. No, it doesn't
It
really
has
ring the
African
bell. It doesn't ring
origins. Yeah. So it comes from the
African
same,
origins.
yeah, it comes from the same basis, but the actual application of it has changed over time. So
Yeah, I have. There is a word that comes from that same origin, Creole, that could also
okay.
be quite pejorative and
Yeah.
rude.
Yeah.
So yeah, you would not want to say that word.
Yeah.
Have to be careful. Have to
Yes.
be careful.
So this again
Yeah.
is we're even with languages similar to like Portuguese and Spanish. I find it difficult all the time when I'm practicing my Portuguese or studying my Portuguese. I have to often think, is that word in Portuguese, in Spanish? Is it in both? Does it mean something different in this
Mm,
language to the other language? So these are challenges that we have as language learners all of
yes.
all
Yeah.
of the time. So when it comes to being preggers, coming back to this, how are you coping with it all?
Well, right now I'm doing much better. As I was saying before, my first trimester was very hard. Like I had really bad sickness, 24/7 hour, 24/7. And like I would also feel really tired and flat, exhausted all the time,
Mm-hmm.
reflux, indigestion. It
Mm-hmm.
was really, really hard for me. But now that I'm in my second trimester, it's much easier. Like I can have more energy. My energy is coming back, and I'm feeling like a normal human being again.
Are you getting strange
Which is
cravings
great.
for things like Vegemite or anything like this?
No, not Vegemite. I'm not having any strange cravings, but I'm having some mild cravings that I like out of the blue. I feel like having something, and I tell James, and he's like, "Oh, okay, we can make that, or we can buy that." But it's very simple things, like I was having very a crazy craving for 2 minute
Two
noodles.
minute noodles, yeah.
Yeah, and I
Is
was
that exclusively to being pregnant, or is that just like, I don't know? I get
I
cravings for two
never
minute
had that.
noodles
I
sometimes as
never had
well.
that before.
There you go.
I I would never have 2 minute noodles in my normal state. But I was just craving it so much. The saltness of the sauce, or the noodles. I don't know.
Mhm.
And because now in Perth it's getting a little bit colder, having something nice and warm
Mhm.
was really appealing to me. And I was like, oh my god, I need to have 2 minute noodles. And it's just insane. Like, why am I craving something that I know is not that healthy? But and I'm just, yeah, I'm just having those really, like, normal
Normal
cravings, I would
cravings.
say. No,
And
nothing completely, like, over the top or super strange. No.
and I know you've got nothing to compare it to, but what do you think is the difference between, saying, being pregnant in Brazil and being preggers here in Australia?
Ah, the difference.
Mm,
Well, yeah, there is definitely difference, and obviously, like, there are a few things that in Brazil people do that here people don't talk about, or has never been a thing, or I don't know how to explain, but I think it's more to do like how you carry your pregnancy. Like, there are a few myths in Brazil, or even like things that people believe that you should be doing that here no one talks about, or
Like
vice versa, or maybe
old wives' tales and things like this.
exactly like some tales, some kind of like, things that some, is historical
Yeah,
to the Brazilian
superstitions.
culture, superstitions, and especially grandmothers. They normally have like, my grandma, for example, um she has her, yeah, her beliefs, and she's very religious, for example.
Hmm.
Maybe that's a good example to give you. My family is very religious, very Christians, and they're always talking about like, God, and the saints, and also like spiritually speaking, in speaking about spirituality in general, not only
Hmm.
about like religion,
Religion.
but spirituality in general. And I feel like in Australia is not really, oh, like you don't really hear about religion very often. Not that it doesn't happen here. I know a lot of people who are Christians, who have various religions, but it's not just as widely and openly
Yeah,
discussed
I
like
think
in Brazil.
I think Latin, the Americas in general are sort of a much more Catholic sort of influenced on
Yeah,
processes like pregnancy and things like this. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So
So
yeah.
yeah.
So are you being very sensible at the moment?
Yeah, I'm a sensible person. I'm always sensible.
Or sensível?
In Portuguese, sensible is sensato. Sensível is sensitive.
Mm,
So the words are very similar, but the meaning is very different.
yes.
You know
So
what I
so
mean?
yes. So when you are preggers, you might be very
Yeah,
sensitive, but you might not necessarily
sensitive.
be sensible, especially if you've got especially if you've got cravings. You might be quite sensitive, but then you might not be
Yeah,
very sensible, and then you might eat 2 kilograms of ice cream or something, or something like
absolutely
that.
right.
Hmm.
I do have to say to you though that in my first trimester, I wasn't being very sensible because I was really hungry and not feeling well. So you
Hmm.
don't really, you're not thinking right. Now
Hmm.
that in my second trimester, the cravings are still there, but I'm much more sensible than I used to be.
So you're more sensible and less sensitive.
Less sensitive, yeah. I'm still
Excellent.
sensitive, but not as much. Yeah, definitely not as much as I was in the first trimester.
Excellent. Excellent.
Yeah.
And James is being the calm, clear-headed person as always, I take it.
Yeah, no, James is a very calm, very kind person.
Absolutely he
And
is.
he's been so lovely. Like when I was really unwell in my first trimester, he was basically doing everything at home, cooking, chores, everything he was doing by
Mm,
himself. He's lovely, and he never
mm,
made me feel bad about it. Obviously he wanted to see me better,
mm.
but there was never a pressure, and I never felt bad about it. Now that in my second trimester he's still doing most of the cooking.
Oh, what a legend.
Hey, I'm not gonna complain.
Absolutely
But
not.
I'm able to help more because I have more energy, so I'm
Yeah.
able to help a little bit more.
Yeah.
And it's been working well for us so far because I'm naturally more anxious than he is, and he
Yeah.
always calms me down and he makes me feel more relaxed
But
about.
if there were ever two people that I met that should be parents, yourself, Emilia, and James are two of the
uh,
people. It's some of the yeah, definitely the best couple that I've seen together on the side of a cricket field. I
oh,
think
thank you. That's
definitely
lovely to
yeah,
hear.
absolutely. And I think probably most people will say the same thing. Yeah, so
Oh, that's nice.
James is an absolute legend, especially at the club. I think if anyone had a problem at the club, he's probably one of the first people that anyone would actually go to for advice,
For
which is
advice.
kind of funny because when you actually play cricket with him on the field, he's he's one of the quietest angry people I've ever met in my life. He's this frustrated
Yeah.
ball of energy on the field, bowling fast, bowling fast at batsmen.
Yeah.
But then off
Well,
the
he
field,
likes
he's a big teddy bear.
absolutely. And I think it's a really good way to describe him because he was saying the other day that when he's playing cricket, he can transform himself into this really other side of himself that he is
He's a different person
normally
in the
is
field.
not. I know, but he does have that massive difference. And I think it's good to have the balance because he is the place where he feels comfortable to show his aggressiveness and
Hmm.
passion about that because a lot of the times he's so collected, so
Mm,
reserved. It's good to have a little bit of that as well. You know what I mean?
absolutely, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the
See?
show, and hopefully this gives James a bit of a bouncer, a little bit of a wake up
He will.
to
He
come
will.
on the
I'm gonna
show,
remind him to go and come here and speak to you.
and a
Be
little bit
part of
more
it.
motivation for him to learn some more Portuguese as well. That would be good.
Yeah, exactly. No, he's I do have to say that he's learning a lot faster now, and he's taking it seriously.
Hmm.
And I'm very proud. I'm very proud.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you very much for coming on the show to talk to us about being preggers and being one of the wags at the cricket club and your
Yeah,
experiences in Australia. Era foi
minha página,
ótimo,
Glenn. Thank
foi
you.
ótimo,
Foi ótimo, foi muito bom. Um
muito
prazer,
bom.
um prazer.
Well, from us here at the Australians Teach English podcast, the podcast by language learners with language learners for language learners, it's us saying goodbye. Ciao.
Ciao, ciao. Have a good night.
Boa noite.
For more information about the Australians Teach English Institute, go to australiansteachenglish.com or follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Australians Teach English.